guys. Welcome back to BSing Sports episode 10. We almost need more hands to count how many episodes we've done. Here with Bill, as always, I'm Ryan. If I sound a little better this week, I got a new microphone, so we're moving up in the world.
Sound crisp.
Yeah. Today, we're going to be talking baseball because baseball is in full swing now. There's a lot to talk about in baseball. And then we're going to touch on the Flyers season a little. We're going to do a year in review, what was good, what was bad, what was indifferent. And then we're going to touch a little bit on playoff hockey, what we got going on in the playoffs. And we're going to lead right into baseball. And the big news, well, it's not big news yet, but the biggest developing news is the Willy Adames trade away from Tampa. He was moved to Milwaukee, him and Trevor Richards, in exchange for two relief pitchers. And this is big news because the number one prospect in baseball for the last 3 seasons, Wander Franco, we're awaiting the call. And it's been 2 hours since the trade, and he hasn't been called up yet. So I wonder what is taking so long.
Yeah, so for those of you who are probably curious, because we post these things on Sunday, it's Friday night. We decided to do a podcast a little abrupt on Friday night, and as Ryan pointed out, the trade with the Rays and Brewers went down about 2.5 hours ago. And Ryan and I have had many conversations over the last 3 years about Wander Franco and how he's the best prospect in baseball and how we're looking forward to actually seeing him. Fortunately, I live right down the road from Tampa, so maybe I'll go catch a couple games with him in it when he gets called up. But the reality of it is there's a reason he's the best prospect in baseball, and it's been way too delayed. Like he should have been probably could have and should have been called up prior to this at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, he was signed at 16 years old. With international prospects, you can sign them at 16. So he is, despite the fact that he's been the number one prospect in baseball for the last 3 years, he's still only 20 years old. He was the number one prospect at 18. And he's been balling out in AA, AAA, no matter what level of the minors you put him in. He's slashing well over 300 in the minors. I know their season's relatively new, relatively young. However, this dude just hits. He plays good defense. This guy's the face of a franchise, a shortstop, a stud in the making, for years to come. So, yeah, some people say it's been too long, but at the same time, he's still very young. So I'm just eagerly awaiting the call because my buddy and I on our trip had a talk about something like this. So baseball attracts people to stars. Like they don't go to watch the game. When we were in the game in Philly, Bryce Harper sat out of the lineup and he was bummed. It kind of turned him off from the game a little bit. So, this is one of those moves for sure that would attract a lot of eyes, and a lot of, even just casual fans would turn to the Rays and be like, oh, let me check in and see how, Wander Franco's doing. I don't know what's taken so long. I know they have a couple other prospects that are playing pretty well in Double and Triple A, so maybe they're going to go to one of them first. I can't see it though. Rays are in the thick of things. That this trade has to have been done because Wander Franco's coming up at least within the next couple of days.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And speaking of the Rays being in the thick of things, right now the Red Sox are first in their division in the AL East. They got one game on the Devil Rays. Sorry,
I didn't call that. I said the Red Sox would compete. Nobody believed me.
Well, right now they're competing. They're number one in the division. They got a game on the Rays, 1.5 on the Yankees, and 2.5 on the Blue Jays. It's a really tight division. But to your point, yes, obviously, Wander Franco is the best prospect in baseball for a reason. I think the Rays made a move here to make an attempt to get just a little more fire out of their lineup and see what Franco's got and make sure we're going forward, or they're going forward in a positive direction.
Yeah, I didn't hate Adames. I didn't think that they would move him like that, but I guess between him, Joey Wendell, Christian Arroyo, and Brandon Lau, he has probably the most value, so they were going to get the most return for him. But speaking of other standings, Bill, baseball, why don't you just give us a general rundown of like where we stand in baseball nowadays, standings, what the outlook of baseball is?
Yeah, so I mean, just basic standings. I'll run through the six divisions really fast for you guys. The NL East, the Mets right now, and again, it's Friday the 21st at 7:00. The Phillies are about to have first pitch. The NL East, the Mets are leading the division at 21-17. The Phillies are 22-22. It's only a game behind them because the Mets haven't played as many games. I'll get into the Phillies in a few minutes. Ryan will get into the Phillies in a few minutes. The NL Central, the Cardinals are 25-18 with a 3.5 game lead in that division. The NL West, the Giants. This is my surprise so far. Quarter way through the season, the Giants are leading the Padres and the Dodgers. I know the Dodgers lost like 14 of 18 in the last 3 weeks. Um,
We actually got an interesting post on the to touch about the Giants real quick before you continue. We got an interesting post on the Facebook page that the Giants rotation leads the league in ERA through almost 2 months of the season. Who would have saw that coming? You know, I was a big fan of Kevin. I was a big fan of Kevin Gosman. He hadn't lived up to his draft expectations. Cueto looked like his best years are behind him, but here they are. They're pitching really well, and that's part of the reason why they're in first place.
And I mean, that's the biggest reason why we actually play games. Predictions and statistics and everything and analytics, they all they come down to is actually playing the game and seeing what happens. Um,
Amen.
so I mean, I don't care much for Gabe Kapler, but good for the Giants being in first place. Now again, we're also only a quarter way through the season. I don't think that holds up. Maybe they make a wild card, which would still surprise me because I didn't think they were gonna be that good. You did, but I didn't. Um, I don't know if you thought you had them taking a wild card, but I remember you
No,
saying
no,
they were
no,
going to
not
compete.
not me. I had them above 500. I had them
Yes.
taking third in that division, but I give it some time. I wouldn't say they're legitimate contenders in that division until they're like, you know, in all-star like break and they're like within a game of like or leading that division.
I agree. I think the Padres will figure it out, and I definitely think the Dodgers are going to figure it out, especially once they get Bellinger back. Um,
Which they desperately need because Corey Seager just broke his hand and now he's out for some time too.
exactly. Uh, but yeah, so I mean, again, good for the Giants. That's my surprise at the quarter mark of the season. Anyway, AL East, I already discussed them a little bit. Red Sox got a 1 game lead on the Rays. It's a really
Hey,
tight division.
who did I say my dark horse for AL MVP was? JD Martinez.
JD Martinez, that is correct. Yes, yes, yes. I had a different. That's fine. JD Martinez, and he's playing A+ baseball. You know who else playing A+ baseball in that division? And I just feel like we can't go every week without talking about it. Is Trey Mancini? I know the
Oh
Orioles
yeah,
aren't winning baseball
absolutely.
games, but Trey Mancini is playing out of his mind right now.
Leads the league in RBIs on a team that's just awful.
18, yeah, 18 and 26, I think the record is, or maybe even worse than that at this point. But yes,
They've
Trey
lost. They
Mancini.
lost. They've lost 9 of their last 11. Like, I mean, we predicted this. We predicted the
Yeah,
Orioles were going to be terrible. Now Mancini's in his late 20s, so he's not like in terms of power, like you know, power hitters. They tend to last like into their 30s, so he still has a few years left on his prime. I'm curious though if they decide to turn him to somebody for prospects or not, or if they keep him because I don't know how the fan base would react to that. You know, with the cancer story, him coming back, he being one of the very few bright spots on that team between him and John Means. I'm curious as to how the fan base would react if they were to deal him
I
or if they could
actually
keep him.
I actually have a different opinion on that. I think because he's coming back from the colon cancer, and again, we don't really cancer is a really fickle thing. It can come and go literally day to day. If he's playing well right now and you can get value for him, and you want to do what's right by Trey Mancini, you trade him to a contender, and that's how I feel about it.
I wouldn't it wouldn't shock me in the slightest, but I'm curious. I'm just curious as to how the fan base would react to that. You know, that's kind of their story type deal. But that's an interesting development going forward. If he's still raking at the All Star break, let's keep an eye on that.
I 100% agree with you. AL Central, the White Sox are leading that division. We weren't really fighting that much.
But
I am surprised about the Twins.
I was about to say my surprise is the Twins because they are terrible. And couple weeks ago, I was reading stats that they were actually one of the better 9 inning teams, but because they were having so many double headers and like an extra inning games that they lost a lot of those games. But in 9 inning games, they were well above 500. So I guess they were plagued by that. But now I have no stats or knowledge as to why they're just bad. They're one of the worst teams in baseball right now, and that really surprised me because
I
that
think they might
lineup
be
was
the worst team in baseball right now.
Mate,
They,
are they?
they might be.
Yeah. I'm not 100% on that, but it wouldn't surprise me because they're just bad. I have no explanation for it. Jose Barrios was supposed to take another step forward. You know, the loss of Eddie Rosario was kind of big, but Nelson Cruz is still there. He's still hitting. I just don't get it. I guess injuries, failure to, pitch well, I guess. I don't know. I have no explanation for why the Twins are so bad,
I don't think anybody does.
but it's May. So
Yeah, again, a quarter mark in the season, they can go on a hot run, and all of a sudden they're in the division again.
yeah.
AL West, the Astros are leading. They only have a half a game lead on the Athletics, which I'm pretty excited about. I'm disappointed in the Angels to this point. They also just lost Mike Trout. You know, Mike Trout, face of baseball right now. However, I think we can't touch on the Angels or that division without mentioning Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, that's another guy who, when you say baseball, like his name should come out of your mouth right away. That dude is putting on a show. And yeah, I know some of us have seen the meme where, he pitches and then he goes out and plays right field and everybody's like, oh, I did that at 13 years old. The difference between being 13 and being in the major leagues, guys.
Yeah,
This
100%.
this stuff is unprecedented. We haven't seen this for years. And he leads the league in home runs right now and has a sub-3 ERA. Like, that's MVP. Like, if the season were to end today, if this season were last season, he's winning the MVP. Yeah, you did say that. You said that. That was your dark horse.
Yeah. So that's why I didn't bring it up a little bit earlier. I knew where my dark horse was, and I knew I'd get to it. I wanted to bring it in. But no, I 100% agree with you. I feel like, and I saw this on Facebook the other day. It was like, I feel like every time somebody's talking about the Angels, they're discussing how Mike Trout went 3 for 4 with 3 home runs, and Shohei Ohtani did something great, and the Angels lost to the Astros 5-3.
I saw that meme too, and it's true. Like, you look around and you're like, with Mike Trout and the way Shohei Ohtani's playing this year, like, how did these guys lose any games? To be honest with you, well, one, Anthony Rendon's starting to look like Albert Pujols 2.0, where he's either hurt, he's more so hurt, and that leads to his ineffectiveness, whereas Pujols was healthy and just ineffective. But another big free agent signing that's not living up to the contract. There's their failure to acquire any good pitching outside of who we just touched on, Ohtani. And
Bundy hasn't panned out.
Yeah, Bundy's been terrible this year. Griffin Canning's been not that good. Jose Quintana, he was washed up a couple of years ago. So, but it's a mystery. You got 2 of the better players in baseball. One of them's arguably the best, and they're going to finish below 500 again.
Yeah, it's just, and like you pointed out last week when we talked about the Pujols release, it's just like wasting years on the best player in baseball's career. You're just wasting years. And again, I know he's hurt right now, so that's definitely not going to help them. If they,
I saw something theoretical so the White Sox are seriously hurt in the outfield, and I saw this theoretical trade, and it sounds kind of stupid. It would never get approved. It'd go to the commissioner's office and get shot down faster than they could read it out. But the Angels should loan Mike Trout to the White Sox with an automatic trade back clause at the end of the season. So, and I guess I don't know who would be on the other side of that trade, but it would give Mike Trout a chance to win a World Series on a better team and fill the need of the White Sox, and the Angels still get their guy back. And obviously that would never happen, but that's something interesting to think about. Like, what if something like that actually happened? They're just like, have this player for half the year. We get him back at the end of the year. We'll play some of your prospects for a little bit, see how they do in the ALS. Like, that'd be.
I feel like there would have to be money transfer there somewhere. Like, you'd be responsible for the rest of Trout's year contract or whatever.
Of course.
But I mean, that's not a bad idea. Maybe you automatically give up a draft pick. I mean, I know draft isn't as big in baseball, but
yeah, there's so many misses in baseball drafts. It's ridiculous.
I know. Look at the Phillies organization. Speaking of the Phillies organization, again, 22-22, second in the division. We just lost JT Realmuto to the IL after spending 8 days of him just not playing. So it was a bench spot that we really could have used. I'm wondering.
He'll be back in a week. It was retroactive to 3 days ago. So
I know. But regardless, that was 7 days, 6 games where we could have used an extra bat on the bench. And the one day we absolutely needed the extra bat on the bench and didn't have it. But
I think the injuries this year between Harper, Realmuto, Gregorius have been poorly mismanaged. It's early enough in the season where, I know you want these guys to play as soon as they're healthy, but I'd rather Bryce Harper sit 10 days now for a wrist injury than have something linger throughout the whole season and he's got to miss 3 games here, 3 games there.
I agree.
Or, Gregorius' elbow is swelling and you don't even know why, so you don't even know when he's going to come back. I think they're poorly mismanaging these injuries, and that's on Dombrowski in the front office. And a little bit of Joe Girardi has some input on that as well. But this is between the training staff and the front office. I think they need to start being a little bit smarter about what they do with these guys.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Especially with somebody like Bryce Harper. I know he wants to be on the field, but it's your job as an organization to tell him to shut his mouth, sit on the bench. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but if I'm at my job and I'm doing something wrong and I hurt myself and I turn around and I try and do the same thing and hurt myself again, I need somebody to be smart enough to tell me to sit down. Like,
Yeah, but
and they're just not doing that. They're letting Bryce Harper do what he wants because he's Bryce Harper. And look, again, I get it. He's Bryce Harper. He's the face of your franchise right now, especially since your ace hasn't panned out. You've been super lucky that Wheeler's dealing. You've been super lucky that Eflin has pitched well and that Vivi until last night for the last 3 games has pitched really well.
Well, even Eflin, I think his last couple starts, he's been pretty shaky. I know last night he wasn't terrible, or his last start, he wasn't terrible. He could have used a hit here, hit there, but like Eflin has pitched pretty well. And we kind of said that he would, not necessarily to the extent that he like came out of the gate and did, but this is kind of what I hoped would happen. I'm not going to say expected. You can't expect anything, but kind of hope what I would happen, like in terms of, let's see if Eflin takes that next step forward.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. We called this in our predictions podcast. I think it was week 3 or week 4 that Eflin was going to be like our mid-range, solid third starter. Like will get the job done. And right now he's showing that he can. And again, I'm still surprised. Like I'm not saying that Vince Velasquez has won his spot in the rotation by any means necessary, especially since he was scratched last night for a sore finger or something like that.
Finger numbness. It's a recurring issue. He's had it before in his career.
Okay, but the last 3 look, the first 2 starts he was absolutely horrendous, pulled in the 3rd inning both times. Like I get it, but the last 3 starts he's pitched pretty well. He's put the team in a position to win all 3 games, and I think he won 2 of them.
Speaking of the Phillies, they just went down 1-0.
They did. I got the game 1 in the corner.
Okay.
Yeah,
but no. So I think there's been some mismanagement in the front office, and this leads into another thing where baseball is, where we stand. The Phillies offense has been, borderline atrocious, but comparatively to the rest of the league, I think they're a top 10 offense as of right now, and hitting in the league is just down. And this leads into another topic we're going to talk about in a second, but hitting is just horrendous. It's the worst that I've ever seen. I mean, and I believe, we'll just mix in the topic right now of there's so many no hitters, guys. There's 6 no hitters. We're not even 2 full months into the season. The most in the modern era is 7 for a season. It was last done in 2012. It was done 2 other times before that. And the most in baseball history was in 1884. There was 8 in a full season. We are 2 months into a season and we have 6. Hitting is gone out the door, guys. Why, Bill?
So technically, and we can discuss this if you'd like to, Madison Bumgarner has won 2 against the Braves on April 25th. I know it was a 7-inning game, but if they're going to count 7-inning games as complete games, then it needs to be a complete game no-hitter. That's how I feel about it. Other people may feel differently, and it's unfortunate. Phillies are down 2-0 now. Great. But I know other people feel differently. But if he goes out there, he throws all 7 of the innings that he is expected to pitch because the game is only 7 innings, and he throws a no-hitter. In my opinion, it needs to be a no-hitter. So there's an asterisk on it, fine, but and the way the MLB is going to talk about it, and the news and the ESPN is all going to talk about it, is that it's only 6 no-hitters at this point in time. But I think Bumgarner at least deserves some sort of recognition for the fact that he no-hit a really good Braves lineup.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, we talked about that on a previous episode, and I agree with that stance. It's not his fault the game was 7 innings. It's not Mother Nature's fault. The MLB decided to make that game 7 innings, so you reap what you sow in that aspect. But yeah, there's been so many no-hitters, and I think it's because, well, they deadened the balls in the offseason. They also raised the laces a little bit, so we're kind of going back to old school. However, back in the day, people used to, know how to hit. Like, whereas now there's just a power surge, everybody's swinging for home runs, but you can't really do that with a deadened ball. And, you're going to result in a lot of ground outs. You're going to have a lot of fly outs that go to the track that would have gone out in previous years. And hitters are going to have to readjust to learn how to hit again, line drives, stay through the baseball like we were taught, in T-ball and Little League. And it's an epidemic, the lack of hitting, and it's a combination of the deadened balls and, the style of hitting that is taught nowadays in the MLB. And it's making for some really good games, in my opinion, because I'm a pitcher. I'm biased to pitching. I love it. Maybe not seeing all these no hitters, but there was a quote from Clayton Kershaw, actually, and he hates the fact that there are 6 no hitters so far. He said that, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said something like, basically, it just wrecks the value of the no hitter with having so many no hitters. And I would agree with him if there were more seasons like this one. But Bill, what's your take on that?
So in terms of Clayton Kershaw's comments, I don't think it takes away from the no hitters that have been thrown. I mean, I know they're all in their own individual stat, but like Joe Musgrove throws the first no hitter in Padres history, and he's a homegrown kid. Like you can't. I don't care how many no hitters have thrown the entire season. That one's not going to go away. Like it's just not. Carlos Rodon for the White Sox. He's the one I couldn't think of last week.
Yeah, we both skipped out on it.
So again, Carlos Rodon, first one he's ever thrown to him, that's not going away. Like I get what Clayton Kershaw is saying. He's saying it's like desensitizing us to the no hitter. Like, oh, we should expect it from now on, and we shouldn't. I got a little bit of a rant on the situation with the MLB right now and all the no hitters that are going on. So they're discussing moving the mound back what was it, like 6 to 8 inches to try and assist hitters and picking up the ball at different times. I think that's absolutely, pardon my language here, effing ridiculous. And I almost said the actual word there because that's how irritated I am by it. 15 years ago, guys were taking steroids out the wazoo, whether the balls were deadened or not. They were taking steroids out the wazoo, and the MLB, because they liked seeing home runs and they liked seeing big scores on the scoreboard, didn't do that much about it. They acted like they were, but they really didn't. We knew everybody in the MLB was taking steroids, and they did very little to change it. And now all of a sudden, because the pitchers are dominating the sport, you want to change what the pitchers are doing. You're going to move them back, make them adjust rather than make the hitters adjust. I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I agree with that stance 100%. Again, being a pitcher, I'm totally biased to good pitching, but that's a ridiculous notion, and I agree. And the MLB did nothing about steroids. They knew people were taking it, and they were illegal in the country, but they weren't illegal in the sport. So they just kind of turned a blind eye to it because the home run race of '98, reinvigorated baseball, and in that aspect, it was great. But then once we found out what it was, it kind of tarnished the whole thing. But there's a saying that chicks dig the long ball, and I guess that's kind of true, but I'll say it in a better way. The casual fan digs the long ball. I think real baseball fans will always admire a great pitching battle because there's more, strategy behind it. There's more, it's more of like a chess match. It's got more of like, that intense feeling. Whereas like somebody steps into the box, you're like, oh, yep, this guy's going deep. Or, like, let's see if he can knock in the 5th run of the inning. Like that, to me, that's not as exciting. But, casual fans, they want to see runs, they want to see action, and that's fine. But I think, real baseball fans will always appreciate a better pitching matchup.
In addition to everything you just said, I feel like when there's a really good pitching duel going on, it makes managers actually manage the game. When you've got guys coming to the plate hitting home runs every other at bat, and you've got like a 7-1 like win sitting on the docket because your team has more power hitters than our team, the managers aren't really managing at that point. They're just making lineups, and it's I think that takes away from the game more than anything. I would rather see a 2-1 pitching duel every single game. It's more high intensity, more stress, and in my opinion, obviously your opinion, it's a better game. If the only 3 runs in the game, it's a 2-1 game, our home runs, great for the MLB. But I would like to see manufactured runs. I want to see stolen bases, which
bunts, sacrifice bunts. And granted, that's harder to do because of the velocity nowadays. Try bunting a 97-mile-an-hour fastball at the letters. It's tough, but and this ties into something else of. Excuse me. Go ahead, Bill. I'm dry throat right now.
No, you're fine. So I brought up the stealing, and I'm glad I brought up the stealing. And here's why. One of the unwritten rules in baseball, and Ryan's going to go into one of the other ones because I know we want to talk about it. And we'll get into it. So I bring up stealing specifically. So if your team, it used to be if your team was up by 6 or more runs and you were on first base, you shouldn't steal second base. I never liked that. Never liked that. Even if I was the team that was down, in my opinion, it's my job as the team that's down to stop Ryan's team that's whooping my ass from doing things. And if you look at it any other way, you're soft, and that's just how I feel about it.
It's not my job to stop me. It's your job to stop me. Maybe you should have pitched better. Maybe you guys should have hit better. It's not my problem. You couldn't do either.
Go into why we're bringing this up. Let's talk about the scenario, and then we'll talk about Tony La Russa.
Okay, so one of the unwritten rules of baseball has become a huge deal in the baseball world and really in the sports world in the last week or so. So the Twins, as we mentioned, are a really bad team, and the White Sox are leading that division. And they happen to be winning a game 15-4 late in the game. Now, the unwritten rules of baseball say you kind of just coast through, give away your at-bats, and just end the game kind of deal. Well, the Twins had a position player on the mound because they didn't want to expend the relief pitchers in a game where they were getting blown out. And he had fallen behind 3-0 to a guy, Yerman Mercedes, who has just exploded on the scene this year as a rookie. This guy's going to win Rookie of the Year. I mean, I don't expect him to keep this pace up, but I think he's gotten such a hot start. Anyway, that's a different subject. So a 3-0 pitch, the position player on the mound just lobs a 46-mile-an-hour ephus in there. And this dude absolutely crushed that pitch on 3-0, leading by 11 runs at the time, and sent it, to the moon and then down behind the center field wall. And his manager, Tony La Russa, who is 874 years old, managed T-Rexes and T-ball. And then that's probably where they got that name T-ball from, is because Tony La Russa was out there managing T-Rexes. And he just did not stick up for his player at all. He said there will be consequences for that. That breaks all kinds of rules. And then his guy, the next game, got thrown at, and he basically just said, good, he deserved it. Like, what? How did that not get you fired right away? Your job as the manager is to stick up for your players. Hell, Dusty Baker, when he took over the job in Houston, started sticking up for his players, and I think he knew they deserved what they had coming to them too. So this is mind-blowing, and if he keeps up that type of attitude, he's going to lose that team by the All-Star break. This is going to be his one and only year managing the Chicago White Sox if he keeps up that kind of attitude.
You think it's even going to take that long? He already had two pitchers disagree with him openly, vocally in the locker room, and then he just come out and said, well, I don't agree with them, so it doesn't matter.
Winning cures all. So I think they'll wait till the offseason. But if they fall flat on their face in the playoffs, or say they have some kind of, bad September run, maybe they somehow miss the playoffs or whatever. Yeah, I think he lasts the full season. I know they don't like, because that would raise a lot of questions. You're leading the division. You actually have the best record in the AL, and they fire their manager. That tends to look a little bad. But I think, maybe in this case, people wouldn't bat so much of an eye at it, but I think they would wait until the full season. After all, as outdated as Tony La Russa is, he has won World Series. He is a winning manager. People know his name. He is, up in Cooperstown. So let's give him kind of his due and then move on, because this was an experiment that is going to fail. Like he doesn't have the locker room. Baseball's changing, and he's not.
So let's give him what you said there. Let's give him his opportunity to do his thing. We had the same discussion last week about Albert Pujols, and there comes a time where if you're not doing your job right, you don't need to have your job. And that's where I feel on it. So if La Russa has lost the locker room, which it seems very much like he has, I'm not saying he can't win it back, so give him a week or two to get it back. But if in 2 weeks they're losing like every other series, and the team doesn't look like they got it together, and players are still coming out and speaking out about the fact that he was negative to his players, because it's not just in the media. It's very mild in the media. I'm sure it's worse in the locker room. There had to have been a conversation. There had to have been an argument. I'm surprised he didn't bench Yerman Mercedes. Like, I said his name wrong, and I apologize, buddy.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Yerman Mercedes. I think
is
right.
It? Wow. Yeah. Okay. But anyway,
you got that one right.
I know. Shohei Ohtani. I know how to say it. I just say it so quickly when we're talking that I run through it.
I mean, you did get Vitai's name right too. You just didn't realize they didn't play for the Eagles anymore.
Halapalooty Vadi Vaitai. You know how hard I worked on learning that name? But regardless, moving past that. But anyway, yeah. So if he's lost the locker room and his players are against him, I think the management or team organization management needs to step in and make a decision here sooner rather than later. I don't think you wait for the season, because if he becomes a toxic cancer, it's going to cause them to miss the playoffs. And they have a really good shot at being really, really good this year. And I don't like, if it's the manager that's causing them not to be because he's toxic, get rid of him.
Especially if Giolito gets right, because he's been off to a slow start too. He's been snake bit. Speaking of less home runs this year, he's been kind of snake bitten by the gopher ball. So once he gets right, I think, they'll have a much better chance. But if I was the GM of that team, and he had said in that post-game presser or to the media, whenever he did it, there will be consequences for that, I probably would have went down and talked to him and been like, look, there aren't going to be any consequences for that. And I signed your paycheck. So we're going to let the kid play. And then had he come out and said in a post-game presser that his player deserved to get thrown at, I would have been like, you're not allowed to speak to the media for the rest of the season. Like that would have raised that comment right there.
Totally justified.
That is not your job. I don't care. I don't care if he deserved it or not. You do not publicly come out and say that. He could have stabbed somebody and then they could have thrown the pitch at him. You could have been, your job is supposed to say that's BS, and you did not stick up for your guys. So that would have definitely not sat right with me at all.
All right. Well, moving on from the unwritten rules, there's a little thing going on in sports right now. For those of you who don't know, it's called playoff hockey. Uh, we all love playoff hockey.
Yeah,
It's
playoff
always more.
hockey this year's been super physical. I think there was 92 hits in one game.
So I have been a little bit behind on the playoff hockey. I will openly admit that to the fan base. Ryan is far more versed in playoff hockey than I am. Um, However, one thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to go into the
Go for it. Yeah, you gonna talk about the incident last night?
yes.
Okay.
So last night, Montreal and Toronto, the Canadians and Maple Leafs are playing a game, and I don't remember what period it was specifically, but Tavares, who's a forward on the Maple Leafs, takes a very legal cross check, is falling to the ground, and the defenseman for the Canadians comes over and damn near takes his head off with his knee. It was completely accidental. It was not intentional. It was obviously not intentional. However, Tavares looked bad on the ice afterwards, and one of the worst injuries on ice I've seen in a long time. The trainer came out, tried to pick him up and like assist him to his feet, and he just like rolled his eyes at the back of his head and landed back on the ice again. They ended up taking him out on a stretcher. He gave thumbs up to the crowd. He's out indefinitely with what's been called a concussion. But just like injuries like that in a very physical game. The game was physical before that, but an injury like that is just super unfortunate to see. And again, it was just scary to see. Fortunately, like I said, he's only been labeled with a concussion. He's responsive, but he's out indefinitely, which in my opinion makes the Maple Leafs pretty much a in and out playoff team. But having said that, moving forward from my opinion on the one thing, Ryan, tell us about playoff hockey. It's all you, buddy.
Yeah, so the Maple Leafs have a history of being one out anyway, and I don't think that that's going to change now because Montreal did end up winning that game, and Carey Price tends to find another gear in the playoffs. So we'll see, how that unfolds. Toronto is definitely the on paper favorite still, even without Tavares, but I I don't know. I can't figure that team out for years. They've just been one and done in the playoffs. My favorite series so far has been the Battle of Florida, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Florida Panthers. Like that series has been a really good series. Through 3 games, the home team hasn't won a single game yet. Tampa won the first 2 in Florida, and then vice versa. Florida took game 3 in Tampa. The Pittsburgh Islanders series is another good one. And what I'm noticing, like a theme across the board, Boston and Washington, is the way that like the playoffs are set up. You have an in-state rivalry in Florida, Tampa. You have a divisional rivalry, Pittsburgh, New York. You have a divisional rivalry, Boston, Washington, and that one, has extended for years. And there's more, rivalries, which brings more physical play. And there is a different level of physical play in the playoffs this year. I don't know if it's because the season was shortened a little bit, so guys are a little bit fresher than they would be in a regular versus an 82-game regular season. But there hasn't been a single bad game in the playoffs, yet this year, and that really excites me. Like every series was played out very well, and I couldn't even tell you who's going to win each series because there's so many upsets in playoff hockey anymore.
Breaking development really quick. The Predators just went up 1-0 on Carolina. Carolina leads that series 2 games to none, by the way. Yeah. Boston starting period 2 with a power play. Again, guys, this is Friday night at 7:35. We're going over what you guys probably already know at this point in time. But either way, for us, it's breaking news, and we just figured we'd bring it to you. Sorry, Ryan, continue.
Yeah. So no, that's okay. That's another series. I thought on paper that series, if there was any series that was kind of going to be lopsided, it was going to be the Carolina-Nashville series. I just think Carolina is way too talented of a team. They play such good defensive hockey. Rod Brind'Amour, former Flyer, I love watching his highlights. I liked watching him play, the years that I could, but that he has them playing really well. They're a very solid defensive team, and they have just enough offense to get by.
Yeah, they're outscoring Nashville 8-2. So 8-3 now in the series. But yeah, again, I've only seen highlights. That was the only series that I thought to myself out loud that could have been a sweep. Everything else I thought was going to be competitive.
Yeah, and another team that's better on paper than they've played in the postseason is the Oilers. We all know who Connor McDavid is. He's not advertised enough, but we all know who he is. We all know who Leon Draisaitl is. They're 1 and 2 in the point standings almost every year, and last year they were the 5 seed and they lost to the 12 seed Blackhawks in the extended playoffs. These guys, this is a team that it just seems like when the playoffs come, like they get exposed somehow. And McDavid is only quote unquote only averaging a point per game in the playoffs for his career, which is, like way off the mark of his regular season, point total. So I'm curious, are people playing him differently in the postseason than they are in the regular season? I can't figure the Oilers out, and they just went down, 1-0 in the series. I think it was last night or 2 nights ago,
last
where the
night.
Jets are up on them. So that's another team that I need to see them figure it out, because they have too much offensive talent, to continually lose in the first and second round of the playoffs. I'd like to see them make a deep run.
So I did catch one game almost in its entirety. I chimed in the second period of last Sunday night's Vegas and Minnesota Wild game. I've never seen two goalies ball like that. You posted
Oh yeah, the Marc-Andre Fleury, Cam Talbot dual shutouts going in.
yes.
That was
You posted something on Facebook. I think once they went into overtime about how they're both playing on their heads,
yeah.
That comment couldn't have been more true. It's been so long since I've seen a pair of goalies look that dominant in an entire game together. Ultimately, Vegas won in overtime, but man, I tell you what,
No,
that was.
Minnesota won that game. They won.
I'm sorry, you're right. I'm sorry, it was Minnesota.
Yeah, no, Vegas won last night 5-2, even up the series. But yeah, that was a physical game. That was a great game to watch. I did tune into some of that. I was catching bits and pieces here and there. And I know Cam Talbot made some good saves and he made more saves, but Marc-Andre Fleury was pulling stuff, was pulling rabbits out of his hat. And, he was doing handstands. He wasn't even standing on his head. He was just, doing upside down push-ups. Like, this dude was nuts.
Yeah,
it was
vintage Fleury we had there.
Yeah, no, vintage Fleury, which I really hated watching, except vintage playoff Fleury was pretty bad. So I enjoyed that. But however, so we're going to run over some predictions, knowing what we know now, who we think is going to take each series. And then we'll probably do this week by week, as we get to the next round of the playoffs. We'll be like, all right, well, who we think is going to win this series. So, Bill, I'll ask you who you think is going to win, and then I'll give you my take. All right, we got the Capitals and Bruins. Boston leads 2-1. Boston's home tonight, and they're actually live for Game 4 right now. Who do you think is going to win this series?
I've got Boston taking the series in 6 games. I realize that on paper, Washington's probably the better team. Yeah. I just think Boston finished the season with more momentum. They're going to carry it over. So I got Boston in 6.
I got Boston in 7. I think the Caps can, push back a little here. And, the first goal of this game, seeing as they're already in the second period, tied at 0, is going to be huge. That's going to go a long way. However, Bruins are currently out shooting the Caps 12-4. So
Carolina tied the Predators. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I just saw that. Okay. Moving on, Penguins and Islanders. Pittsburgh leads 2-1.
So I hate the Penguins. Let me preface everything I'm about to say with I hate the Penguins. I literally have it typed on here. The way I have it worded is Pitt leads series 2-1. I hate the Penguins, so I hope the Islanders can come back and win the series. So let's say it goes 7, but I still got Pittsburgh taking it.
So I'm trying not to be biased here because I really don't like the Penguins either, but I do like the Islanders making this comeback. I think they're a little bit deeper of a team. I think they're a little bit more sound defensively. They are a little bit more physical of a team, and I think that tends to go a longer way in the playoffs. However, Pittsburgh does lead the series 2-1, so we'll see. Islanders are home, so mathematically speaking, this playoff series so far is going according to plan. Islanders have won 1 game, Pittsburgh's won 2. Islanders are home Game 4. Moving on, Game 3 currently in progress. Nashville and Carolina. Like you said, you thought this one could be a sweep. I thought it could be a sweep. I'm going to say Carolina in 5, but yeah. Carolina in 5.
Yeah. But like I said before, this is the only one that I looked at and I like assessed it, and I was like, well, if there's going to be a sweep in the first round, it's going to be this series. But I mean, it's really hard to sweep a team in the playoffs, 4-game set. So I assume that the Preds are going to get a win here somewhere. It might be tonight, might be in 2 days. Not 100% sure when, but I think they do get one. But yeah, Carolina in 5.
Yeah. Moving on, and this next series is interesting because this is why I say playoff hockey is the best playoffs all around. So the Tampa Bay Lightning are the returning Stanley Cup champions. You would think, that they would have the best team on paper. I know they were missing Nikita Kucherov for the whole regular season. They're the number 3 seed in their own, division. They were the third best team in their own division, let alone not even the first best team in the conference. So they aren't even technically the home team for this series. So in the Battle of Florida, it's Panthers versus Lightning. Game 4, Tampa does lead 2-1. However, who wins that series and how many games?
So when we did our hockey podcast with Frankie a couple weeks back, I was trying to name his podcast.
I know he's live with Jake right now, talking
Yeah.
215 actually.
Yeah. But anyway,
go check them out, guys. They got some really good material.
Yeah,
talking 215.
And Frankie, I'm so sorry, buddy. We're gonna have to
nitty gritty.
Nitty gritty. Thank you. We're not editing it.
It
is the nitty gritty. Up there in Philadelphia, Frankie, and obviously we had Jake on as well for the talking 215. But when we were talking, we all said that we thought the Lightning were like shoe-ins to repeat. I think they get out of this series. I think they get out of the series in 6 games, but I don't think they last much further than that.
It's hard to say because the regular season was a little skewed. Not having Kucherov, was big, but now that he's back for the playoffs, you got to let him get his legs under him. And what a tough series to just like come out and try and get your legs under you, literally, because he had hip surgery. But I think the loss of Ekblad for the Panthers is huge. Like he's the best defenseman that they had on their team. So I say Tampa does get away in 6, and I think they go a little deeper than that. Once Kucherov gets his mojo back. But that's, like I said, we'll talk about that next time. I agree. I think Tampa gets out of this in 6. Would not surprise me in the slightest if it went to 7.
Agreed.
Moving on, we got the Oilers and Jets. Winnipeg is up 1-0. They are. I don't know what's wrong with the Oilers, but I'm taking the Jets.
How many? Because I got them in 6.
I got them in 7. I think there is some pushback. I think that Draisaitl and McDavid can get something out of their hats for 3 games, but I think the Jets just are a deeper team. Whereas I think this is the flaw with the Oilers is they're a little top heavy.
Yeah.
They have Darnell Nurse, they have Nugent Hopkins, they have Draisaitl, McDavid, and that's they have stars and they have like role guys. Like they have nobody that's like in between. And I think they lack the depth to beat a team like the Jets. Wheeler, Scheifele, Hellebuck, very good goaltender. So we'll see what happens in that series. But I have the Jets in 7.
Okay.
Maple Leafs and Canadiens. We just touched on this a little bit. Toronto's got a history of being 1 and out. Go ahead and give me Carey Price's squad in 7. I got the Habs.
I also have them in 7.
7?
Yeah. We talked about it. I don't got to go into it at all.
Yeah.
We already discussed it.
Yeah. All right. Avalanche and Blues. This one, the results, kind of surprised me so far. Colorado does lead 2-0, but
they're outscoring
very, very, very good hockey games, and there is a lot of talent on the ice for both of these teams. Like these teams are very good hockey teams. So who do you have?
So at the current moment, Colorado's outscoring. Sorry, I've got one of my dogs like begging for food under my feet right now. But Colorado leading the series, they're outscoring the Blues 10-2 right now.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised. There's a lot of talent. Ryan O'Reilly is a Selke Trophy contender every year, and he's getting bullied out there.
So 5 games, and I got the Avalanche.
I'm gonna say they clean sweep them.
Yeah, what's funny is I have it written down clean sweep, but I still think it goes 5.
I initially, when I first looked at it before the series started, I'd been like, this is going 7 games. Like I know it's a 1 versus 4 matchup, but I was like, yeah, this is going to go 7 games, no doubt. Like the Blues are just too talented, but they, the reason they're a 4 seed this year is because they haven't quite put it all together. They do have, like I said, a lot of talent, but the puzzle pieces just haven't lined up. And then Colorado, Nathan McKinnon, Landeskog, those dudes are on another level right now. I mean, McKinnon is skating circles around everybody. And like I said, Ryan O'Reilly's a Selke Trophy contender. And for those of you that don't know, the Selke Trophy goes to the best defensive forward every year. So for as good of a defensive forward as he is, they're being outscored 10-2. And I think McKinnon has like 6 points. Like this guy's just nuts. And like I've talked about him before, he's really fast, really good hockey player, really fun to watch. So I have the Avalanche, just based on the way everything looks, clean sweeping them.
All right, I like it. We got
And
one.
last series we got is the Vegas Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild. This is a 2 versus 3 matchup where Vegas leads the series 2-1. And there is a game Saturday night in Minnesota. So who do you have in this series?
Knights and 6.
I'm going to say Knights in 7. The Wild have surprised the heck out of a lot of people this year.
Yeah,
And
and on Sunday they showed that they might be able to compete, but then the next 2 games, the Knights are up 2-1 right now, and the Knights have given it to them the last 2 games. So at first I thought maybe 7. I think maybe the Wild win one more, probably at home.
Cam,
I
Cal- Cam
got
Talbot's played really well this year, though. And,
yep.
as a whole, and he does have those spotty games like that. I don't think Minnesota's deep enough to win this series. So I could be 6, but I just think, they're a 3 seed for a reason. If you look on paper at both them and the St. Louis Blues, you'd be like, there's no way that the Wild are seated above the Blues, but yet here they are. So I'm going to go ahead and say Vegas in 7, but that's like a comfortable 7. It's not like they're going to be biting their nails 7, if that makes any sense to anybody.
Yeah.
Also, breaking news: end of the first period in Nashville, and the Predators do have a 2-1 lead. They did score before the end of the first period.
Yeah.
So that ends our playoff hockey, talk. What about non-playoff hockey, specifically the Philadelphia upsetters? I mean, Flyers.
So I actually almost wore my G jersey tonight, and then I thought better of it because of how disappointed I was in how the season ended. At one point in hockey, for a good 20-game span, the Flyers were the best team in hockey. It's not an exaggeration. Put it on paper. Go back and look from the beginning of April to the end of May. Oh no, wait, I'm sorry, that timeline's wrong. But anyway, regardless,
Beginning of the season, yeah.
beginning of season, yeah, for about 2 full months, they were the best team in hockey, hands down. Like, just couldn't be touched. Carter Hart wasn't playing that great, and yet they were still winning games because they were averaging 3.5 goals a game. And then we go right about 3 weeks before the All-Star break, and they just disappeared. I don't know if teams started playing them differently. I know they had injuries. I know they started getting hurt. The team got COVID and they never recovered from it. I get all these things, but they just fell off the map. And at times it looked like they were going to come back. And then all of a sudden they started losing to bad teams, losing to good teams, not competing anymore. We discussed this before. I'm not super worried about Carter Hart. Sophomore slump. It's going to happen. Carey Price had one. We've talked about it. But they got to go get some defensemen, and I think they need to get rid of some of these older guys, JVR, Voracek, and as much as it pains me to say, because I love we got to go find some new talent. Maybe not next year. Maybe next year just try and focus on getting a couple of defensemen who can actually play defense rather than Shane Gostisbehere, because
and Justin Braun and pretty much anybody not the Russian horse Ivan Provorov.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So Flyers year in review, in one sentence, extremely disappointing. You and I made a bet on them to win the cup at the beginning of the season, and for the first 2 months, we were ecstatic.
Yeah,
because they were the best team in hockey, and out of nowhere,
you stole those words right from my mouth. So I'm not entirely concerned, because if you look at it in reality, the Flyers only had a bad 2/3 of the season, and people are calling for Alain Vigneault. And for 2/3 of his tenure as a Flyers head coach have been really good. They were well overachievers last year, which I think that kind of set the fan base up for failure this year. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, nobody expected what happened this year happened, but they came out of the gates hot. They were the number 1 seed in the division for a while. They were competing. They were 6th in the league in overall point percentage. I think they even got as high as 4th. They were a very good hockey team. They weren't playing very well defensively, but the offense was there. They were scoring goals. They were coming after teams, and they were playing just well enough. And maybe, teams started playing them tighter defensively, and that exposed their flaws in the back end. Who knows? But like you touched on, I'm not exactly worried about Carter Hart. I would, JVR does need to go. I agree with that. He had a good season this year on paper, but he was super streaky at times.
He was a liability at the time.
Voracek, Couturier, and Giroux were the least of our problems, and people just want to point fingers at the veterans, but they were the only ones that showed up. It was these young guys. and his story is great. So I'm not trying to bash that at all. Oscar Lindblom was terrible this year. Nolan Patrick was terrible this year. I know they're both coming back from injuries and the cancer last year. So you didn't know what to expect from them, and they were both awful. Farabee had a great year on paper, and he is a young guy, so I'll give him a pass for this. But he was also really streaky. There'd be a couple weeks at a time he'd have like one goal, and so yeah, he did hit 20 goals for a season, but he was scoring them in chunks, and then he would just disappear. Kevin Hayes was probably the worst Flyer this year in terms of expectation versus what they actually produced. Kevin Hayes looked lazy, he looked tired, wasn't moving his feet, wasn't playing great defense. He looked awful. And like I said, anybody outside of Provorov and Goss was there for a couple weeks there. They were all terrible. So the whole team just kind of simultaneously fell apart right around the COVID issue. And I'm not saying COVID was the reason that they started to play bad. Maybe it had a factor, but that's right around the time that this team fell apart. And part of it's going to be a mystery why. I like Jake Voracek. I think he's a great passer. However, as I've touched on previously, he is no better than a good second liner on a good playoff hockey team. You can look down the list of these teams, and there's not a single team that Jake Voracek would play on the first line. He's just, he's out of place here. And I'm not saying he's not talented enough to be here, but they're just using him incorrectly. So I wouldn't hate to see him go. Claude Giroux is coming up on the final year of his contract. I want him to win a cup in Philly, but I'd like to see him win a cup anywhere. So I predict that he goes to Colorado at the end of his contract next year. They have a nice young team. They're going to be on the up and coming. They're going to, compete for cups year after year. And then maybe he comes back to Philly and retires as a Flyer. But I agree, they got to move in a different direction. And currently, I got my eye on Carolina defenseman Dougie Hamilton as the running partner with Ivan Provorov. This dude's an offensive defenseman. He's a big guy. He plays physical. He plays fast. He plays smart. And he's a right-handed shot. So they can pair him with Provorov, no problem. I know Alain Vigneault loves his lefty-righty combos on defensive pairings. So that, to me, and him in Carolina, from what I hear, are at a massive impasse at contracts. I think Hamilton wants like $8 million, and Carolina's giving him like 6.5. So he's gonna hit the open market. There's gonna be a lot of suitors. I'm hoping the Flyers can dump enough money to go after him.
So for what it's worth, the comment you made there at the beginning about a lot of people blaming the veterans because they're the veterans. I'm not blaming the veterans for the way the season went. I'm not blaming COVID. It's just, and I'm also not blaming AVR. It's just unfortunate that the season turned out the way it was, but like I said before, I even mentioned G going at the end of his contract. I'm thinking not a rebuild, but like a restructure, and maybe in 2 or 3 years we can compete. I just don't think it's going to happen with the veterans we have on the roster at the time. Provorov's considered a veteran, so he'll still be here. Farabee could still be
a veteran at the ripe age of what is he, 25?
Exactly. But overall, I think the team needs, again, not a rebuild, because we have pieces. We can use pieces. We have a goalie. We have a top 7 defensemen in the league. We just gotta, get over that hump and stop being so loyal to these guys that we've had for years, just because we're loyal to these guys because we've had them for years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's kind of where I stand with Jake. I like Jake. Like I said, he produces, but he's just out of place here. He's not a top line guy. We need to go. I wouldn't hate if Seattle took Jake. It would clear a lot of cap. It would give them a top line, a top 2 line winger for an expansion team. That's not terrible. It's not a terrible start. And they have a cap minimum they have to meet anyway. And you don't see a lot of teams giving up guys that are, getting paid, $6-7 million. So who knows if they leave Jake or JVR or both unprotected, it wouldn't shock me if one of them left.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But the Flyers just fell off a cliff, and I'm not terribly worried about the future of this team. They have a ton of prospects. This team, the minor league affiliate, the Phantoms, they're stacked with talent. They got, Cam York, Wade Allison showed up for a little bit at the end of the year, and he played great hockey. They have young pieces in place. Farabee's only 21 years old. So the young talent's there. So they don't necessarily need a rebuild. I think we're kind of in that period right now where the young guys quite aren't ready to make the jump yet, and they still have to see what they have with some of these other guys in the lineup.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's going to do it for us, buddy.
Yeah, we covered a lot. Covered a lot, and I love talking baseball. I'm sure we'll talk baseball next week because baseball will still be happening next week, and I'm sure something crazy will happen during the week. So,
but yeah, so one of the points we made last week about Tim Tebow being the talk of Jacksonville.
He's
ESPN,
already the number one selling jersey in the NFL.
ESPN has talked about two things in the last 48 hours. Two things for 24 hours straight. For 2 straight days, the NFL or the ESPN has talked about 2 things. They talked about the game-winning buzzer beater that LeBron hit over Steph Curry in the game the other night, and they talked about the Tim Tebow signing. They've literally touched on nothing else. There's playoff hockey going on. They haven't touched it.
And they just signed a contract to take playoff hockey next year. So you would think that they would at least, preface it some.
Nothing. All they're talking about is the LeBron jumper over Curry and the Tim Tebow signing. So 100%, you were right last week. Only thing that they're doing is taking focus off of Trevor Lawrence, and that's not where it needs to be.
Yeah. Did you hear what I said? Tim Tebow's already the number one selling jersey in the NFL for this season. That's ridiculous. His jersey number just dropped like this morning.
85.
Yeah, 85. There's 85 reasons for me not to get that jersey.
Correct. But that's going to do it for us here. Sorry, I wanted to bring up that last little fact there because ESPN's irritating the shit out of me, crap out of me. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. As always, please subscribe, tell your friends, tell anybody who you think might like sports. We want all the subscriptions. We want all the followers. We want to have conversations. Again, check us out on Facebook. We're very active on Facebook. We're pretty active on Twitter. Please talk to us there. And we look forward to talking to you guys next week, right?
Yeah, stay engaged, guys. We like doing this, and we like, getting engagement from our followers. So stay tuned, stay in touch. In the coming weeks, we'll probably do an Eagles upcoming, season. We're going to talk to Jake. Maybe we can get him back on the show. Maybe we can go talking 215. Who knows? So keep your eyes on the horizon, guys. We got some big stuff coming up.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Another night